everyone, welcome to the Competitive Events Tips Workshop. We're so excited to have you here and we can't wait to go deeper into our competitions and give you guys some tips on yours.
All right, just so for some quick introductions here, I'll go first. My name is Dorian Ho, I'm your state parliamentarian. As for my competitions, I placed first at ILC in medical spelling back in 2019 and then in medical terminology this past June.
And my name is Kulkarni. I'm the Northern Regional Vice President for this term, and I was actually a ILC finalist in prepared speaking, and both of our contact information is on the slide, so feel free to reach out to us with any questions or concerns.
Right, so our workshop here is just delving deeper into our specific events, so medical terminology, med spelling, and prepared speaking. And their respective categories, those being health science events and leadership events, but we hope that there's something here for all of you to take away. We've tried to make this specific, but at the same time general enough for you guys to all have some broad spectrum takeaways. Then we'll go into some recognition events we want to advertise, and then some frequently asked questions about competitions in general for HOSA. I'll start first with health science events. So the first step I always say to people is to know your resources. Well, what does that really mean? So some questions you need to consider is where will each resource be used? What weight does the event give each resource or subject, such as say 50% to the root words of MedTerm, let's just say. Where might I find my resources, and can I use resources not officially approved by my events guidelines? So for the first two questions, I'll actually get to those later through a worked example, but for the later two, I'm just going to answer those right now. Where might you find your resources is a great question because most of these things are textbooks and they are kind of expensive. So always reach out to your advisor and to your school or even former competitors to see if you can get those at no cost to you. And finally, using resources not officially approved by your event's guidelines. It's always acceptable, but it's best to stick with what's in your event's guidelines. I know a couple of people who did behavioral health and used actually the AP Psych textbook. That actually works wonders as well. So it really depends on what textbook really suits you and how you can learn the information best. This might vary between positions. Now, back to those first questions about resources and where you'll see each. So here we can see the 4 resources for MedTerm. Ehrlich, Stedman, Dean Vaughan's, which I've actually never used before because that was added this year, and also Tabor's Cyclopedic Medical Dictionary. The thing is, resources aren't created equal. That's the thing. And so you need to know where each is going to be used and how much time you're going to spend on using all of them. So the first 3, Ehrlich, Stedman, and Dean Vaughan's, are all actually going to be used for the multiple choice questions. These are the parts that are most important because they're going to actually be graded in terms of the MedTerm test. As for Tabor's Cyclopedic Medical Dictionary, this is really only going to be used for tiebreakers, and it's a really lengthy text, about 2,800 pages, so you really shouldn't be wasting time there anyways. It's really only used for tiebreakers and only if the other 3 books you've really had a solid foundation in. Along the lines of ranking, we've also got ranking topics. As I said before with the weights, just be very cognizant of where you're distributing your time. Roots, prefixes, suffixes, and combining forms for MedTerm here takes up almost half of the entire test in weight, and the rest is just all A&P and MedTerm of all body systems. That said, you should always know how to prioritize both your resources and your topics, and that's really the key here for knowing your resources. Next is knowing what and how to study. So some questions you might consider here are, how might I as a learner, retain information best? What information is most important or most likely to be tested? And I do want to mention that there is no one-size-fits-all study strategy or method to go about this because everyone learns at a different pace and in a different way. However, I do want to tell you some of the objective truths about most of these tests. And instead of looking at MedTerm this time, I want to look at med spelling and the resource provided there, which is, of course, Tabor's 23rd edition of the Cyclopedic Medical Dictionary. So I've actually read this text about twice now, but I've also taken the test about 3 times now. So from that, I've learned really what they're looking for in terms of content that you garner from your text. So here's just a question here, a little interactive activity. Take a few seconds and just see which words on this dictionary page might seem the most important or most likely to be tested on. So from my lens as someone who's taken the test extensively and studied the book, I will always ask another question, an opposite question of this. Instead of what's most important or most likely to be tested on, I look at deduction. I look at what's least important and least likely to be tested on here. So things that are least likely to be tested on in terms of medical spelling might be your taxonomic classifications, so species names like those listed on the side there, obscure eponyms, literally anything that a quick Google search couldn't tell you what it is. You don't really need to worry about things like that. Pharmaceutical names, drugs are almost never tested. Most compound words, you should really be cognizant of compound words. Some of them will be, but in most cases, that's not something you need to worry about. Abbreviations and word parts, obviously, and I put medterm there because learning medterm is really important for this, because once you're making mass Quizlets and all of these things, you really don't want to be wasting time with putting down medterm, because that's a system and knowledge base rather than anything else. And so once you ask these questions, I look back at this and I scan this, and I can just say the 3 most commonly likely to be tested words here are probably going to be fermentaceous, fucosidosis, and the last one on the right is fucotaxis. So really the takeaway from knowing what's most likely to be on the test is just contacting former competitors, people who have taken the test, and knowing what best to study so you're not wasting your time, just like, again, with knowing your resources. And finally, it's knowing the test structure. So the questions to consider here are what types of questions might be asked. You've got recall. Recall is just restating or regurgitating something that can be easily found in the textbook, or application or analysis, which really applies more to ATC knowledge tests and things like medical math. Just knowing what types of questions will be asked and how well you need to know the material. For something like medical spelling, for example, it's almost all recall. So you really won't need to busy yourself with knowing the definitions, etc. So also make sure to familiarize yourself with the guidelines. So you can also find example questions and the test and competition format on the guidelines, and that'll actually be found at hosa.org/guidelines for all of the more than 60 events we've had. Now on to you, Sia, for the leadership events.
Perfect. Awesome job, Dorian. I mean, those were some amazing tips, and I think everyone who's attending is really going to benefit from them. So next up, like he said, is leadership events. So I kind of wanted to break this down into a step-by-step process because I think that's something that I really could have benefited from if I had. So the first step is to really identify your skills. So in the leadership type of event, you really get the chance to hone down on interview skills or speech skills, and you really need to identify them. That's the first step. So some questions to consider when you're doing this are, do I enjoy being in an interview scenario? Because a lot of the competitions, some of them have to do with an interview. So knowing whether you thrive in that sort of environment is super important. Another question could be, would a strength of mine be creating a portfolio and then being asked to present it? That's another thing that a lot of the competitions have you do. So if you're good at compiling a lot of dense information into one solid portfolio, that might be something that's great for you. And can I develop it if I don't have it already? So if you're the type of person that can adapt to any sort of situation that's thrown your way, a leadership type of event might be a great type of scenario for you to be a part of. And then, does giving a speech on a given topic excite me, and how passionate am I about this year's topic? So I decided to include this because this is something that I definitely thought about while doing prepared speaking. I've been doing it for the past 2 years now, so I'd say that I'm pretty well experienced. And so that's something that I always ask myself. How passionate am I about this year's topic, and how can I expand and go further into it beyond just the surface level? So these are important questions to consider. Next up, obviously, is choosing an event. So once you've kind of honed down the skill that you feel you would thrive best in, you need to sort of categorize those skills into one event. So these are the different events that are listed here, and I included a target on the top right because really your skills are your darts and you're trying to find the best target for those darts. So for me, those ended up being in prepared speaking because that's something that I personally really enjoy, and the topics so far have been things that I'm pretty passionate about. So that's why I decided to throw all of my darts toward prepared speaking, but who knows, maybe next year I'll do another event and we'll see what happens from there. So the third step would be to really gather your resources and do some research. So I decided to include the 2020-2021 theme, which is Unlock Your Potential. And that is, I think, a really great theme to just sort of expand your horizons on something that you might have started. And, because of everything with COVID going on, really deciding how you can unlock your own potential is so important, especially now. So some things to think about with this theme are, what does this mean to me? Now, like I said, this theme especially, is just 3 words, but it really is it's all about how you interpret it. So you can interpret it in 10 different ways, and it all matters about how you are able to present it. The second is, which route do I want to take with the theme? So that's sort of what I mentioned earlier. What route you want to take depends on how passionate you are about the theme and where you want to take it. The third thing is, how can I expand it beyond its literal meaning? So unlocking your potential, it seems pretty self-explanatory, but it really isn't. You can take it far beyond the literal meaning, so that's something you should definitely consider. And depending on the answer to these questions, what should I research to obtain the best understanding of my content? So once you really hone down on what maybe 3 big ideas you want to focus on, then you can do the research to obtain the necessary information to expand on those topics. The fourth step would be to obviously read the event guidelines and then know what to expect. So for instance, for prepared speaking, the top 3 points that are on the guidelines sheet are, first you have to compile a speech that's based on this year's topic or the year's topic, and it has to be between 3 and 5 minutes long. And flashcards are actually allowed to be used. So knowing these guidelines will definitely help you be prepared for any event that you're going into, right? The guidelines are the key to doing extremely well in the competition, and Dorian also can attest to that. Knowing the guidelines is definitely key. And so some tips that I would give you for doing well in a leadership event would be, definitely practice your speech or your skills in front of your friends and family to get their feedback. I found this to be extremely helpful because when you show your speech to someone or when you show them your portfolio, you get multiple perspectives because, like I said, everyone looks at something in a different way. The same 3 words can be interpreted 3 million different ways. So getting different feedback is super, super important. The next thing is to obviously be confident in your abilities. The fact that you've chosen to do a leadership activity means that you're capable of going well beyond what's expected. So just be confident in what you decide to do and trust that you can do it. And third is to check if flashcards are permitted for your event, because that's obviously a great plus. For prepared speaking, they are, but for a lot of the other competitions, it's definitely a great idea to check beforehand. And this seems cheesy, but obviously be yourself. That's the most important thing you can do in any competition, but especially in a leadership event where you're putting yourself out in front of, judges and saying something like a presentation. Definitely being yourself is a really important thing to remember anywhere. And so the next topic is recognition events. And we wanted to highlight 3 of them. So the first one is OSHA safety awareness. This involves taking a test on safe work practices, and it's exclusive to NJ-HOSA. And that's just something that makes NJ-HOSA so great, is because it offers stuff like this. And it's also excellent prep for occupational health and safety ATC test at ILC. Taking this test is another great stamp that you can add to your resume, or something that shows people or employers that you really are taking work safety into consideration. So that's super important. And the OSHA workshop is on day 2, so keep that in mind. Anti-vaping campaign, this involves speaking, writing, and presenting a campaign on the ills of vaping. And as we all know, vaping has sort of taken over this generation. So we wanted to include this campaign to have the youth take charge and show that, we can do something about it. And obviously, no one does it better than NJ HOSA members. This is exclusive to NJ HOSA, and you're also eligible for scholarships through Catch My Breath, which is an amazing organization, through these competitions and through the campaign. And that is also on day 2. And last but not least is the Barbara James Service Award. And this is actually something that I took part in last year. And I earned the gold level recognition for this, which is 250 plus hours of volunteer service. So just going into what it is more specifically, it involves submitting community service hours through your chapter advisor, and it has to be between June 1st, 2020 and May 15th, 2021. As I said, the levels of recognition are gold, silver, and bronze. So for gold, it's 250 hours or more. For silver, it's between 175 to 249.5 hours. And for bronze, it's 100 to 174.9 hours. So definitely, if you have community service hours, or if you're involved in your community on a very high level, this is a great award to consider.
All right, now we'll get into some frequently asked questions about competitions in general. Our first one that everyone seems to ask is, how do I know which competitive event is right for me, right? There are so many events in 6 categories across all disciplines in healthcare or just in leadership in general. So, Sia, I guess, how did you know that prepared speaking was right for you?
Great question. So basically, like I said before, knowing which competitive event is right for you depends on your skill set. And for me, like I included in my slides, I kind of went through that step-by-step process. And first, I identified my skills, and most importantly, where I felt the most confident. So personally, I love being in front of people. I love, just expressing myself through ideas that might not be well known or well seen. And so in a competition like prepared speaking, I think that that's super interesting because, like I said, last year's theme was towards tomorrow. So 2 words, and there's so many different speeches that can result from that. So that's something that I find so creative, and it allows me to express myself and be creative with my words. So that's something I value. And so knowing which competitive event is right for you really just depends on what skills you have. And maybe if you don't have those skills yet, to develop them. And if it's something you're really passionate about, then you'll know which competitive event is right for you.
Thank you, Sia. I guess for my answer here, for which competitive event was right for me, I picked medical spelling at first because that just seemed quite interesting to me. It's really kind of an obscure topic. The only resource listed is a dictionary. I'm like, I would love that challenge, just going through the whole lexicon and just finding the most obscure words in all of MedTerm. That would be just my dream. I actually really ended up enjoying it. So I would really recommend it to anyone who also has those linguistic inclinations, I guess. But it was really just interesting for me, and I learned a lot through that. And really, that's the experience that I know that you can have once you find the right competitive event for you. Because all of these things are suited in order to ignite your passions, things that have already been there, but HOSA competitions are an outlet for you to develop those skills and that interest. All right, on to our next question.
All right, so Dorian, this one goes out to you first. So how will competitive events look this year?
Yeah, so of course these are quite troubling times, and we're all in a state of flux. We barely know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're really only living for today. Well, the thing is, competitive events aren't really going to change that much. Regionals, as you might know, is going to be virtual this year, and we're looking at states very strongly to see where that might be virtual or in person. But for regionals, your advisors should have actually gotten an email regarding all of these competitive events and how they're going to look. We do try and we do intend that the same structural integrity of the event is still there. We really want for competitors still to be able to develop their skills and passions through these events, and it being virtual should be no barrier to that. Yeah, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, I think you summed it up perfectly. Nothing stops NJ HOSA from being NJ HOSA. So, as much as we can to keep it the same and to allow our members to really, develop their passions through any of these events, we're going to try to do that. And virtual or not, we can guarantee that it's going to be a great experience, and you'll still get to learn a lot. So stay tuned for that.
All right, next question. This one's to you first, Sia. What advice would you give to first-time competitors?
Perfect. So the advice that I would give to a first-time competitor is honestly to just go for it. Being a first-time competitor, I know it can be really scary and it can be really intimidating because a lot of these events, they expand on knowledge that's on a very high level, right? And being a first-time competitor means that you're just kind of dipping your toes into it for the first time. But what's so great about HOSA is that it gives you that chance. It gives you that chance to get your feet wet and get started on something that you might be really passionate about and just explore it. Because exploring is, everyone has to start somewhere, right? You have to take that first step and really just delve into whatever you think would get you excited. And so that's advice I would give to a first time competitor, is to really think back on something that you would really enjoy doing and kind of relate it to a topic or a leadership event or a test, like Dorian mentioned. And if that's something that you want to learn about or that you are already interested in, then definitely just go for it. Dorian, what about you?
I guess everything you said there, Sia, spot on. But what I would also add is also just to enjoy the experience, because what comes with competing is also going to our conferences and meeting other people who are just as passionate about healthcare and making change in their communities as you are from all across New Jersey in general. So it's more than just competition. HOSA really is more than just that. And so first-time competitors, it's more like uh, it's really more than just competition. I guess it's your first experience really coming into HOSA. I really want you not to call yourselves competitors, because we're not really all about competition, but maybe collaborators is better, because what we're really doing here in HOSA is empowering leaders to become the next future health professionals. All right. Thank you all for staying with us through this whole thing. Of course, we've also linked our contact info should you want to reach out to us after this workshop. Sia, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, well, like Dorian said, we're so happy that you guys decided to attend. And we really hope you guys learned a lot about competitive events in general, and you really benefit from the tips. We hope that you do. So thanks for attending, and we really do look forward to a great year. So good luck, guys. Bye.
Bye.